The patrons have spoken and they have summoned both a classic Gen 2 Pokemon and its new evolution, which marks the first Generation 9 Pokemon we are covering on this channel. Many first encountered Girafarig back in the wild grass of Gold and Silver's Route 43, while others may remember its role in the opening sequence of the Spell of the Unknown movie, where it battled Ash's Chikorita. Girafarig has a seemingly innocuous design, but only for the most part, and that other part is incredibly unnerving as its tail has a head and a brain of its own. One wonders what link Girafarig may have initially been intended to have with Wobbuffet, who has the same type of tail. The two are even next to each other in the Pokedex, suggesting at least some sort of connection. Speaking of unnerving, in Girafarig's original intended design, its second head was supposed to be as big as its main one, a terrifying image, enhanced by its originally planned dark typing, alongside a pre-evolution whose name was the Japanese word for twins. Sure, its name is a palindrome, but so is Ho-Oh's, and its design isn't like this. Farigiraf has really gone all in on the nightmarish style of the original concept. That tail with the brain has grown and fused with Girafarig's head. Goodness gracious. Today we're going to see how these two have fared in the competitive scene. Given how cutthroat it is, were their long necks impediments, or did they prove two brains were better than one? We'll find that out as we ask, how good were Girafarig and Farigiraf actually? And in this video we'll be going over these competitive formats. Girafarig stood nary a chance at leaving any sort of impact on the OU of its debut generation. Its solid move pool was let down tremendously by its aggressively average to poor stat spread, alongside a debilitating half-normal typing. Even its access to Baton Pass, a move whose power tended to find niches for otherwise poor Pokemon, wasn't enough to land it a niche, as the Baton Passers populating OU were far better. In UU, however, Girafarig was the real deal. Some players occasionally used an all-out offensive set for it, which was decent at hitting pretty much the whole metagame for worthwhile damage, but it could be a tad underwhelming. It was with Baton Pass that Girafarig showed its stuff. It was capable of doubling two different stats and sending them off for the benefit of its teammates. The first way it did so was Amnesia, whose special defense boost could be sent to powerful physical attackers like Scyther and Dodrio, making them much harder to revenge kill for Pokemon that relied on special attacks to hit them, like Electabuzz and Nidoqueen. Now, this use was legitimate, but more on the specific side, as the effect of a special defense boost being passed wasn't necessarily game-ending. Far more impactful was when Girafarig decided to pass agility instead. Suddenly, it went from passing a helpful boost to one that could potentially end the game on the spot. You wouldn't think this is possible in Generation 2, which was renowned for its bulk and longevity, but UU, while packing several reliable defensive staples, did not possess walls as unwavering in the face of boosting threats as those populating OU. Thus, when Quagsire used Belly Drum, you weren't stopping it by taking its hits, you were stopping it with faster offense, except when Quagsire had the issue of its low speed fixed by receiving an agility pass from Girafarig. That all went out the window, and odds were it was going to destroy everything in its path. Even if you managed to withstand and take out boosted Quagsire, you weren't necessarily out of the woods, because Girafarig could come back in and agility pass to another Belly Drum user on the team. Usually this was Politoed, but Poliwrath was a legitimate choice as well. Girafarig was also an ace at getting the pass off unperturbed, because with Psychic and Thunder, it smacked the tier's users of Haze and Roar, like Quillfish, Amistar, and Blastoise. It became the tier's premier Baton Pass user for its agility antics, and its impact only grew over time as players figured out how to optimize the teams it was used on. With screen support, you couldn't threaten Girafarig with direct damage nearly as easily, making getting the pass off even easier than it already was, and thus allowed Girafarig to threaten the pass multiple times in case the first sweep attempt didn't work out. Keeping up with two Belly Drum users past agility in one game proved to be an unreasonably difficult task for the metagame, and the player base began scrutinizing the potential uncompetitive nature of agility pass. As we've explored in our Baton Pass video, Baton Pass tends to throw a wrench in metagames of all sorts, and Girafarig of all things was a fantastic example, as it had a genuine stranglehold on the tier. Eventually, it was voted on and Agility Pass was banned from GSC UU. That's right, you weren't expecting that. Yeah, old gens tend to have wacky stuff by today's standards, especially in the lower tiers, but the Girafarig video starting off with how it overwhelmed UU to the point of requiring a ban, that's pretty nuts. Post-ban Girafarig was merely okay, but no matter, as it was still too much for the tier that was most famous for being ruled over by Nidoqueen. What a rockin' debut for Girafarig. Who knows what other kinds of mayhem it caused over the generations. Generation 3 blessed Girafarig with Calm Mind, giving it far greater potential as a baton passer. Sadly, Girafarig was far from the only Pokemon capable of passing Calm Minds, even in UU, and it was pretty much always the worst choice for the job. Now, nothing else could pass both Agility and Calm Mind, but between Girafarig's frailty and weakness-laden typing, it was pretty much never going to find the opportunity to successfully set up both boosts and pass them off. Thus, one was better off just focusing on Calm Mind passing, especially since Agility passing in and of itself didn't have much of an impact, since it was difficult to find a sweeper so potentially dangerous that it justified using a Pokemon just to get a speed boost. And if you were to Agility pass for whatever reason, you'd use Scyther, which was one of the best Pokemon in the tier in its own right. So since passing both Agility and Calm Mind together was out, and passing Agility was out, you want the best Calm Minder passer for the job, and Girafarig wasn't even close to the best choice for any scenario. Lunatone was the premier choice for the role, with its impressive typing providing it many switching opportunities against the host of normal and flying stab in the tier, with its levitate ability granting it an outstanding immunity to Earthquake and Spikes as well. Hypno was also one of the best Pokemon in the tier in its own right, and could leverage its huge bulk to get passes off. Plus, with its Insomnia ability, it even outclassed Girafarig's Early Bird at dealing with sleep, blocking it completely rather than waking up early. Even Mr. Mime was superior. It was stronger, faster, and packed valuable utility tools in Encore to facilitate setup opportunities for itself, as well as the soundproof ability to block would-be pass stoppers Roar and Perish Song. With its comparatively feeble stat spread, Girafarig couldn't come close to matching the utility of any of these Pokemon, and by the cruel whim of the tier Pokegods, it didn't even fall to NU for some truly unfathomable reason, given how it was pretty much never actually used in UU. Thus, Girafarig was cursed to forever waste away without usage in Generation 3, which was a real shame, as it likely would have been quite a good Pokemon in NU. Continuously outclassed as a baton passer and unable to mount any sort of usefulness in its own right, Girafarig was passed over by the discerning gazes of trainers looking for the most viable choice. This time around, there would be no bizarre platitudinous languishing in UU. Girafarig was instead to crash into the bottommost floor of NU with a dull, unceremonious thud, followed by the silence of the player base that barely acknowledged its existence, let alone impact. And why would they? Mr. Mime and Hypno were in the tier, and they could pass the far more threatening Nasty Plot as well, whereas Girafarig was still stuck with Calm Mind, strange considering the design of its tail, which makes it seem tailor-made for plotting nasty things. Furthermore, in addition to its outclassed speed, its pallid bulk was even less impressive than it had been previously, itself quite an achievement on account of the massively power-crept damage being thrown around in Generation 4. What with the higher base power of moves and new boosting items like Life Orb, being a psychic type that didn't resist fighting didn't necessarily sting in the generation that introduced close combat if your secondary type was great, like Steel, but if it was normal, you pretty much got all the bad and nearly none of the good. Yeah, immunity to Shadow Ball was nice, but not nearly enough to warrant usage. Had Girafarig been a pure psychic type, well, it still likely would have been outclassed given those stats, but at least it would have been better. It really is a shame about those stats. Girafarig's move pool also had some unique options, notably Sucker Punch, but as it stood, using Girafarig for anything beyond Baton Pass was a fool's errand, even more so than using Girafarig for Baton Pass unless playing by a custom set of rules that banned all of its competition or something. If the status of untiered had existed in Generation 4, Girafarig would have earned it at the earliest opportunity, as even in never used, it was never used, at least not by anyone with the goal of winning. Generation 5's Dream World blessed many Pokemon down on their luck with just the hidden ability they needed to find some sort of viability somewhere. To cite just one example, the Dream World gifting Slowbro Regenerator is why it has been such a great OU wall since Generation 5, as opposed to its UU status when it only had Own Tempo. So what great prize did Girafarig receive en route to becoming at all viable again? It got Sap Sipper. Now don't get us wrong, Sap Sipper is a fantastic ability in and of itself. Being completely immune to grass moves is fantastic enough, and receiving a +1 attack boost if you are actually hit with said grass move is even better. The trouble was that while it's a great ability for a decent to good Pokemon, it's not nearly enough to pull Girafarig out of mediocrity. While adding a grass immunity to Girafarig's list of resistances was of course a good thing, it needed far more. Its typing still riddled with flaws, and its stats continued to be what they were as power creep exploded to stratospheric heights around it. Yeah, potentially being able to pass attack boost was cool, but nothing more than that. It was a bonus, not something Girafarig could pull off reliably. Girafarig didn't need little bonuses. It needed a reliable foundation to build off of first, and it was just not getting anything there. Yeah, receiving Stab Hyper Voice was cool, but it didn't do anything for the functioning of its role. It's not like it was that strong. It remained horribly outclassed even all the way down in NU once again. When you had a Calm Mind pass option as good as Masharna, one of the best Pokemon in the tier, there wasn't a chance you were ever going to seriously even think about Girafarig. It was in effect completely passed over and had a thoroughly forgettable Generation 5. In the vein of Gen 5's Dream World gifting hidden abilities, Generation 6 notoriously brought several previously meager Pokemon into the competitive limelight by gifting them a Mega Evolution. Girafarig was one of many such Pokemon that would have benefited greatly from such a boost. It was also one of many such Pokemon that didn't end up receiving one. This was especially a shame because the design potential for a Mega Girafarig incorporating its tail has incredible creative potential. It'd even be an excuse for Game Freak to get rid of that great hindrance, its normal type, or at least do something more with it. Anything to prevent Girafarig from pretty much just existing uselessly for another generation, which, shocker, it did. Even though the PU tier now existed even below NU, enough generational power creep had accumulated to where Girafarig couldn't find a niche even there. Different and yet similar to how it had missed the boat for NU in Gen 3. At least Gen 6 gave it Nasty Plot, but both as a passer and abuser, it was outclassed by Mr. Mime. Of course, the former point was moot by virtue of the Baton Pass ban, so Girafarig was even more outclassed as an offensive psychic type by other non-passing threats in Behem, Grumpig, and Duocean. It was unceremoniously untiered and overlooked once again. Generation 7 was more of the same for Girafarig. All the Z moves in the world couldn't save it from once again being too awful even for PU. At least the set it could technically pretend to run was interesting. Off the top of your head, you never think of Choice Band Girafarig as anything but a joke, but that was indeed its purported variant. In the grass move heavy PU, it could theoretically use Sap Sipper to gain a valuable attack boost, then fire off its stabs, return, and the newly gained Psychic Fangs, with Earthquake to hit most steel types. Bulky walls that could take its hits like Ferroseed could be ruined by Trick. Sounds nice in theory until you realize that Girafarig was just too weak to pull it off, especially since PU was absolutely loaded with actually strong normal types, from Stoutland to Dojo to Kangaskhan. So to untiered it unfortunately was once again for Girafarig. Girafarig never showed up in Generation 8, but appeared in Generation 9 with an evolution in tow. Having an evolution wasn't just good for the Girafarig line, it was good for Girafarig itself, as it was now a not fully evolved Pokemon, and thus joined the ranks of Little Cup, where it has instantly become the single best Pokemon in the tier. That stat spread, which was so meager at level 100, utterly dominates at level 5. Its Eviolite boosted bulk is great, its speed is superb, and it hits hard on both sides of the spectrum. Its Nasty Plot set is vicious, especially with its new psychic stab option, Twin Beam. The multi-hit nature of the move makes it particularly powerful with the damage mechanics at level 5. It's particularly terrifying with Terastallization, as it can Terra into a fighting type and completely turn the tables on dark types, both resisting their moves and crushing them with Terra Blast. Physical Girafarig is monstrous as well, with Psychic Fangs, Earthquake, and Crunch forming the crux of its moveset. And it's even more difficult to answer if it Terastallizes into a dark or ground type, and rounding out its set with the normal stab and paralysis option of Body Slam, or the speed boosting option of Trailblaze, which allows it to clean weakened teams up even more easily. And so Girafarig is, at the time of this video, the most singular elite defining presence in Generation 9 Little Cup. Farigiraf's stab boosts are the stuff Girafarig's been dreaming of for so long. It suffers a significant speed loss, but in return gains an utterly mammoth base 120 HP stat. For reference, this is equivalent to Cresselia and Arceus, and goes well with the slight boost to both defenses it got. Farigiraf also boasts a much improved base 110 special attack and a unique ability, Armor Tail, which makes it immune to priority moves. But Farigiraf hasn't found itself much suited to the high-powered OU environment, and early UU has proved itself to be beyond its reach as well. But in the fledgling developing stages of RU, it has found a decent niche as a double dance sweeper. With its solid bulk and support from dual screens, allowing it to use the special attack and speed boosting capabilities of Nasty Plot and Agility respectively, it unleashes wickedly strong stored powers, with boosted Dazzling Gleams eliminating dark types, whose total psychic immunity make them the only Pokemon truly safe from stored power. Speaking of dark types, Farigiraf's ability to withstand priority moves extends to Prankster as well, and thus it is excellent for fending off the massively irritating Sableye. And time will tell how Farigiraf fares, but it seems to be heading for a solid place in the Gen 9 lower tiers. Farigiraf's Armor Tail extends to its allies, which in conjunction with its solid bulk, power, and most crucially, access to Trick Room, gives it a niche in VGC. Being able to block Fake Out is particularly outstanding, as is completely denying King Gambit's Sucker Punch, both allowing Farigiraf to reliably set Trick Room up and deny attempts to stall or revenge kill the Trick Room abusing teammates Farigiraf supports. Farigiraf isn't just useful for stifling priority either, as being immune to Annihilape's Rage Fist is superb. Farigiraf also takes its support a step further with Helping Hand, letting its teammates hit even harder. This turns Trick Room threats like Dreadnought and Hariyama into one-hit KOing machines, and Farigiraf has already proved itself in the early stages of the VGC season, wasting no time as Aaron Brock achieved an impressive 4th place with it at the first opportunity possible, the San Diego 2023 regionals that kicked the tournament circuit off. And though Farigiraf is far from a Trick Room staple, as there's plenty of competition for the role, such as Hatterene, but given the plethora of priority roaming VGC, it's almost certain it will continue to see at least some usage and success as the season progresses. And that's it. So how good were Girafarig and Farigiraf actually? Well, Girafarig's had a rough go of it for most of its competitive career. It wasn't always like this, as in Gen 2, it actually got Agility Pass banned from UU because it was so overwhelming in conjunction with belly drummers. Sadly, since Gen 3, Girafarig has been perpetually outclassed and ignored, but it finally received its redemption in Gen 9, where getting an evolution allowed it to play in Little Cup, and there it is crushing it. As for Farigiraf, it's looking to establish itself as a firm presence in the lower tiers and VGC. So all in all, while the Girafarig Lions had it tough for a while, things are finally looking up. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thank you so much to the patrons for continued support of our videos and for voting for these Pokemon for this month's patron pick. And if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And in the comments, I want to know, what do you think about competitive Girafarig and Farigiraf? How would you buff either of them to have them do something in OU? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.